we go along through this presentation, think about these 6 key questions that funders are going to ask you and ask yourself, where are you keeping that data, or do you have that data at the ready in your organization or in your system? All right, so the first question you should be prepared to ask is, what services are you actually providing? So not just generic, like, yeah, we do some good work in the community with kids. No, what services are you providing? What quantity, what quality, what services are you actually providing? And then through those services, what results are you achieving? How are you changing lives? How are you changing circumstances? And how do you know that you're achieving those results? So what evidence can you share? So it's not just about, oh, we're providing these recreational services and we're, making kids happier. Well, how do you know that? What data are you collecting to know that you're making kids happier? Also, this is a fun fact. Funders don't just want to see rosy picture. To be honest, funders will trust you and believe you more if you can come to them and tell you what program improvements are needed. So because of our evidence, because of our data, we learned, and I'll tell you a really great story of one of our Sure Impact customers who was using Sure Impact to look at the impact of the effectiveness of their housing stability programs. And they had a certain group of their population who had access to case management because their funding allowed for that. They had another section of their population who did not have access to case management. They didn't have funding for case management. And because they had access to this real-time data and information, and they were able to see on their dashboard the relationship between what was done and the results, they learned that those residents who had access to case management were 2.5 times more likely to stay stably housed than those who didn't. They were then able to take that information. Most of their programming before was funded by government grants and government subsidies. So they were able to take that information to private foundations in their community that they had never sought funding from before, and they now had a case for support. They now had a reason to go to these private funders and say, these philanthropists, and say, yes, I know a lot of our funding does come through government sources. However, there is this contingent of our population who does not qualify for these benefits. And we're learning that their outcomes are actually worse than our residents who have access to these government sources because these don't have access to case management. And therefore, they were able to get that case management services fully funded from private donations to supplement their work. And now they knew they were starting to drive equal outcomes. So that those program improvements, don't shy away from them. If they're data driven, it actually can help you bolster your case for support, raise more money, and then start to improve your success rate, improve your operations. So you will be able to tell your funders, and we're going to talk about cost per success in a minute and how you calculate that. But you'll be able to tell your funders what support would be helpful and why, and what data or evidence do you have that suggests that if they do invest in this and if you do deliver this program in this way, what greater impact can you create? And then the last question they will ask you is, how will you sustain the program? Now, this is a little bit harder sometimes to answer because, let's be honest, most of you are reliant on funding from all kinds of sources to stay in business. It's the nature of nonprofits. I don't believe that every nonprofit needs to have a social enterprise attached to it, but I can tell you when you're answering that sustainability program, the more you can prove that you are reducing reliance on public benefits or you are creating positive social change, the more sustainable your organization becomes because it's a no-brainer to invest in your nonprofit, that you become an institution of impact. We heard stories all during the pandemic that our clients they were approached by donors. And I don't know if you guys know how many foundations there are out there that they're not secret. I mean, they're out there, they're public, but they do not allow for solicitation. They don't even allow for invitation. only. They are doing their own research, they're doing their own diligence. They find, what nonprofits they believe are worthy and creating the impact that they want to see. And then those nonprofits get a phone call and a check. And that is the type, you want to be that nonprofit. You want to be that nonprofit that is out there so visible, sharing your impact with data that those nonprofits that are doing that, or those foundations that are doing that due diligence, seeks you out and gives you the check. That's how you become a sustainable program.